The war had already gone on for many years, and humanity had been losing ground in almost every battle. The Valorian Empire was strong, advanced, and ruthless. Their fleets crossed the stars like storms, breaking apart weaker civilizations and forcing them to kneel. Most alien races believed humans were too fragile, too young in space travel to ever matter in the galaxy's history. Daniel Cole never thought he would end up standing before the high command of the Valorians. He had been nothing more than a mechanic, fixing engines on supply freighters that carried food and weapons to the human front lines. But when his ship was ambushed near the Kiever Belt, his crew was killed, and Daniel was captured alive. Now he stood in a massive chamber of steel and black crystal, surrounded by towering armored guards. The air smelled sharp like metal and smoke. Alien banners hung above, marked with glowing symbols that shifted as if alive. The voices around him spoke in the Valorian tongue, a language both harsh and melodic, like thunder mixed with song. Daniel's hands were bound in magnetic cuffs, and his knees ached from being forced to kneel. Yet he refused to bow his head. He stared forward, his jaw set, even as every instinct screamed at him to stay quiet and live another day. At the far end of the chamber, a figure walked forward. She was taller than most of the guards, her armor gleaming black and violet under the cold lights. A crest of silver marks ran across her chestplate, symbols of victories won in countless battles. Her eyes glowed faintly gold, and her presence silenced the room. This was Commander Zira, known among enemies and allies alike as BrokenStarlight. Stories said she had fought 100 campaigns, and that even her own soldiers feared her anger. Yet when she looked at Daniel, there was no hate, only curiosity. One of the guards barked out, "Human prisoner brought from the Kievar Belt, low value. Suggest disposal." Daniel clenched his fists, ready for whatever would come next. He would not beg. He would not give them that satisfaction. But instead of giving the execution order, Commander Zira tilted her head slightly. Her voice was low, calm, and carried through the chamber with authority. "Why do you not kneel, human?" she asked. Daniel's throat felt dry, but he forced the words out. "Because I only kneel to my own people." A wave of murmurs spread through the officers. No one, not even alien prisoners, spoke to her like that. The guard who had brought him down struck Daniel across the back, forcing him lower. But the human pushed himself up again, shoulders shaking with effort. His defiance only made the silence in the chamber sharper. Commander Zira stepped closer, her golden eyes never leaving his face. For a long time she simply studied him, as though he were some puzzle she could not yet solve. Finally she spoke again. "Humans are supposed to be weak, fragile bones, short lives, and yet here you are standing against an empire." Daniel managed a tired smile. "Maybe that's why we're still standing. Because no matter how many times you crush us, we get back up." The silence in the hall broke into soft laughter from a few officers, though it was not kind. They mocked him, whispering that humans were foolish creatures trying to sound brave before their death. But Zira did not laugh. Instead, she raised her hand and the hall fell silent again. "This human is mine," she declared. Her voice echoed, final and unshakable. "By decree of BrokenStarlight, he is my personal mate." The word stunned the chamber. Officers exchanged shocked looks. Guards stiffened, unsure if they had heard correctly. For the Valorians, the title of mate was no small thing. It was a bond, a claim of ownership and protection, a statement that no one else could touch what had been chosen. Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. Mate, he thought. What in the stars was she talking about? He had expected death, not... This one officer dared to step forward, bowing low. "Commander, forgive me, but a human as your mate? Surely that is beneath your station." Her golden eyes burned, and the officer stopped mid-sentence, trembling. "Do you question my decree?" she asked coldly. The officer lowered his head quickly. "Never, Commander." "Forgive me." Zira turned back to Daniel. Her gaze was sharp but not cruel. "You belong to me now. No one will touch you. No one will kill you. You will live because I have chosen it." Daniel's mind raced. He wanted to argue, to shout that he belonged to no one, but he was still bound, still surrounded by armed guards. He bit back his words, breathing hard. Zira stepped closer until she was standing right in front of him. For the first time, he noticed something different in her eyes. Not just cold power, but something else, interest, curiosity. As if she had found something rare, something she had not expected. "You are defiant," she said quietly. so only he could hear. And I find it useful. With a wave of her hand, his cuffs unlocked. The guard stepped back uneasy, waiting for him to collapse or try something foolish. Daniel rubbed his wrists, keeping his eyes on her. I didn't ask to be anyone's mate, he muttered. Her lips curved, not quite into a smile, but close. That is why you were chosen. A true mate does not beg for the title. He earns it. Before he could answer, she turned away, her cloak sweeping behind her. Bring him to my ship, she ordered. He is under my protection now. The guards obeyed, though unease filled their movements. As Daniel was led out of the chamber, his thoughts swirled.
He had expected death.
Instead, he had been claimed by one of the galaxy's most feared commanders. What did she want from him? Why him of all people, and what would it mean to be the personal mate of BrokenStarlight? The answers would come later. But one thing was already certain. Daniel's life had just changed forever. The warship of Commander Zero was a giant beast of steel and fire. It moved through space like a predator, with long spines of metal that glowed faintly against the darkness. Daniel had never seen anything like it. Human ships were small, built for speed and survival, but this one carried whole armies. He was led through echoing corridors, past soldiers in dark armor who stared at him as though he were some strange animal dragged aboard. The rumor had already spread. Their commander had chosen a human as her mate. Whispers followed him wherever he walked. Some laughed openly. Others glared at him with hatred. Daniel pretended not to notice. Inside, though, he felt the weight of every stare. When the guards brought him into the commander's private chamber, the doors sealed shut behind him. The room was vast and high, filled with silver banners and holographic maps of star systems. A large table glowed with tactical displays, and beside it stood Commander Zira, her armor removed, though she still carried herself like a living weapon. Her eyes turned toward him the instant he stepped inside. You walk without fear, she said, even when every soldier here thinks you are a mistake. Daniel crossed his arms, still trying to understand this strange situation. Fear doesn't change anything. If they already hate me, what difference does it make? Her golden eyes narrowed, studying him. Then, to his surprise, she gave a short laugh, a rare sound, sharp like breaking glass. Your words are sharp. Most species tremble in front of me. Well, Daniel muttered, I'm not most species. She tilted her head. No, you are human. The word came out as if it carried both insult and respect. Daniel did not know what to say, so he stayed silent. Zira walked to the glowing map and gestured at the stars. Do you know why I claimed you human? Daniel raised a brow. Because you wanted to confuse your officers? That laugh again, but softer. Not only that, you stood when others would kneel. You spoke when silence would have saved your life. That is rare even among warriors, and She paused, searching for the right words. I value rarity. Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Where I come from, we don't call that rarity. We call it stubbornness. Her gaze sharpened. Then perhaps stubbornness is a weapon your kind wields better than most. The silence stretched. Daniel wanted answers, but part of him also feared what she might say next. Finally, he asked the question that had been burning in him since the chamber. What does it even mean? This mate thing. Where I'm from, it doesn't mean property. Zira studied him closely, then answered slowly. In Valorian law, a commander may choose a mate. That bond is absolute. It means you are under my protection. No one can strike you. No one can kill you. Not even the High Council. Your life is tied to mine by decree. Daniel blinked. So you saved me from being executed by claiming me. Her golden eyes did not waver. Yes, but protection comes with a cost. You are now seen as part of me. If you fall, I fall with you. If you fail, it is my failure too. Daniel frowned. That doesn't sound like much of a deal for you. She stepped closer, her presence filling the room. Perhaps not. But I do not follow logic alone. I follow instinct. And mine told me that you are worth the risk. For the first time, Daniel saw something in her expression that was not cold command. Curiosity. Perhaps even respect. Before he could answer, the doors opened suddenly and an officer stormed in. His armor clattered as he bowed quickly. Commander, forgive the intrusion. But the crew is restless. They question your decree. Zira's eyes burned. Do they question me, or do they question a human? The officer hesitated. Both, Commander. They whisper that your judgment is clouded, that choosing a fragile species as mate will weaken your authority. Daniel felt the tension rise. the weight of the officer's words hanging in the air like a blade. Zira turned slowly toward him, then back to her officer. Her voice was ice. Then let them Life aboard Commander Zira's warship had changed for Daniel in ways he could never have imagined. The corridors of steel, once alien and intimidating, were now strangely familiar. He learned the routines, the schedules, and even a little about the complex technology of the Valorian fleet. Yet every day brought new tension. Every whisper from officers, every sideways glance from soldiers reminded him that most aliens did not see him as anything more than a fragile human. Syra, however, did. Her golden eyes would watch him as he worked on machinery, or even when he simply sat quietly observing her fleet. There was no sign of indulgence in her gaze, only a sharp assessment as though she were weighing every choice he made. "Why do they stare at me like that?" Daniel asked one evening as they walked through the ship's observation deck. Stars stretched across the black canvas of space, glittering faintly. "They do not know how to see humans," Zyra replied. "They have rules, traditions. Your presence breaks them. That is dangerous for them," Daniel frowned. "Dangerous for me or for you?" "Both," she said simply, her hand brushing against the rail. "Do not forget that every whisper against you is also a test of my authority. And some officers will try to use that to their advantage." Daniel's mind raced. He had survived war, ambushes, and capture, but surviving Zira's own officers seemed like a battle of its own. A few days later, the first real challenge came. One of Zira's lieutenants, a tall Valorian named Kale, cornered Daniel in the engineering bay. His segmented armor gleamed under the lights and his claws tapped against the metal floor. "Human," Kyle said, his voice low and threatening. "You walk among us as if you belong. My commander has chosen you as her mate, yes, but that does not give you respect. You are fragile. You are expendable." Daniel stood tall, refusing to back down. "Maybe I'm fragile, but that doesn't mean I can't be useful." Kyle laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Useful? You are lucky she finds amusement in your stubbornness. But one mistake and you will learn what it means to be expendable." Before Kale could strike further, Zira entered. Her presence alone shifted the room's energy. Kyle froze, sensing the authority radiating from her. "Step away from him," she commanded. Her voice carried the power of storms. "I did not claim him for your approval nor for your understanding." Kyle bowed quickly, hiding his anger behind forced obedience. "Understood, Commander." Zira's eyes softened slightly as she turned to Daniel. "Do not let their threats scare you. But remember, they will test you. All of them will. Your survival depends on showing them you are not weak." Daniel nodded, feeling both fear and determination. Survival was more than avoiding death. It was about proving he belonged in this alien world. In the following weeks, Daniel began observing the fleet in action. The Valorians were brutal and efficient, striking out at enemy supply lines, crushing small human colonies and expanding their reach across the stars. But Daniel's human mind saw patterns that others ignored. A small flaw in a ship's shield generator, a predictable timing in a patrol route. He began offering suggestions to Zira. At first, she did not trust them. Humans were fragile, untrained in warfare on a galactic scale. But one night, when a patrol ship malfunctioned mid-flight, Daniel spotted the error instantly and instructed the repair crew to bypass the damaged module temporarily. The ship was saved, and a fleet operation that could have failed was averted. The next day, officers began murmuring. The human, they realized, was not only alive but capable. Some grudgingly admitted it in whispers. Others fumed with jealousy. Zira noticed it too. She called Daniel to her chamber and studied him closely. "You are beginning to change the way they see you," she said. "I don't want to change their minds," Daniel replied. "I just want to survive. And maybe help a little." Her lips curved faintly. "And yet you do both. That is the nature of humans, it seems. You survive. You adapt. And sometimes you even thrive." The days passed, but the peace was short-lived. Kale and a few other officers plotted in secret, hoping to embarrass Zira and remove the human from her side. They spread rumors of incompetence and claimed that Daniel's suggestions were reckless. It was a delicate game, full of subtle traps and hidden accusations. Daniel sensed the tension, but he refused to panic. He began learning not just engineering, but also the subtleties of alien politics. Observing Zira became a lesson in strategy and patience. He saw how she handled the whispers, how she commanded respect, and how she balanced fear and loyalty among her officers. One evening, while repairing a damaged drone, Daniel was confronted by Kyle again. But this time he was ready. He calmly explained the flaw in a battle plan that Kale had proposed, showing the potential loss of ships if executed incorrectly. Kale's pride flared, but he could not dispute Daniel's logic. Zira, arriving silently behind them, watched the exchange with sharp interest. "See," she said to Kale, "this human is not just survival instincts. He is observation, calculation, and courage, all of which you would do well to remember." The confrontation ended without bloodshed, but the message was clear. Daniel was no longer just the prisoner or the commander's mate. He was someone whose skills and courage could not be ignored. That night, Daniel and Zira spoke in private. The stars stretched endlessly outside their chamber window, silent witnesses to their unusual partnership. "Do you understand now?" Zira asked softly. Daniel shook his head. "Not entirely. But I think I'm starting to see. They underestimate humans, always. And maybe that is what makes us dangerous." Her golden eyes glowed faintly. "Dangerous is not always enough. You must earn respect, human. Strength, wisdom, and courage. And you must show them that survival is only the beginning." Daniel nodded, understanding the weight of her words. He had survived the Valorian capture, avoided death, and even earned a small measure of trust. But this was only the first step. To truly belong in her world, he would need more than luck. He would need to prove that humans could be more than what the galaxy expected. In the days that followed, Daniel continued to assist the fleet in ways that no alien had thought possible. From adjusting the timing of fleet maneuvers to repairing critical engines, he became indispensable. Slowly, the whispers began to shift. Not all, but some. Even Kale, though he did not admit it, began to respect the human's presence, if only grudgingly. Zira observed it all quietly, noting the subtle changes. Her choice had sparked more than curiosity. It had begun to reshape her officer's perception of humans. She had chosen Daniel for his defiance, his stubbornness, and his unbroken spirit. And now, as the fleet moved forward in its campaigns, that choice would ripple through the Empire in ways she could not yet predict. At the end of the week, Daniel stood beside her on the observation deck, watching distant planets drift past the ship's path. "I never thought I'd see this," he said quietly. "Humans, actually making aliens notice us." Zira's golden eyes met his. "You are more than they expected. And that is only the beginning." Daniel felt a strange pride rising within him, tempered with fear. He had survived capture, defiance, and whispers of betrayal. But the war and the challenges of being the mate of BrokenStarlight were just beginning. And somehow he knew that whatever came next, he would not face it alone. The Valorian Empire's fleet moved through the Nebris sector, its warships cutting a path like shadows across the stars. Commander Zira stood on the observation deck of her flagship, BrokenStarlight, her golden eyes scanning the holographic maps that hovered before her. Beside her, Daniel leaned over the display, studying the fleet patterns and enemy positions. "Something doesn't add up," Daniel said quietly. "The patrols are too predictable. They always retreat to the same coordinates. If we hit them there, they won't be ready." Zira raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "And what do you suggest, human?" Daniel pointed to the map. "A diversion. If we send a small squad through the Nebris rift, it'll look like an attack from another route. When they focus there, we strike the main fleet from the side. It's risky, but it could work." Zira considered his plan silently. Risky was her middle name, and yet something about this human's reasoning made sense. She had been observing him for weeks now. Every decision he had made, every suggestion had been precise, logical, and unexpected. "Very well," she said finally. "We will try your strategy. But know this, if it fails, you are still my mate. That does not guarantee your survival." Daniel swallowed, but nodded. "Understood." Orders were given, ships moved, and the fleet readied itself. The Valorians had never faced an enemy like humans before. Creatures who seemed fragile, yet thought in ways no alien had predicted. As the plan unfolded, the diversionary squad darted into the rift. The enemy, seeing the apparent attack, shifted their defenses. Then, as Daniel had calculated, Zira's main fleet struck from the side, catching them off guard. Ships collided, weapons flared, and explosions lit the darkness of space. From the observation deck, Daniel watched in awe. His calculations had worked. For the first time, a human mind had dictated the flow of a major fleet maneuver, and it had succeeded. Yet the victory came at a cost. A smaller squadron under Kyle's command took heavy losses. Kyle himself scowled as he reported the numbers. Daniel expected anger directed at him, but Zira did not scold. Instead, she addressed Kale with cold precision. Your loss is regrettable, but... The galaxy trembled in silence before the storm. A rival Valorian fleet had emerged from hyperspace, larger and more heavily armed than anything Zira had ever faced. Rumors spread through the corridors of BrokenStarlight that the fleet's commander intended to remove Zira from power. Claiming her decisions, especially keeping a human mate, had weakened her. Daniel studied the enemy's formations, his brow furrowed. He could see patterns, weaknesses, and timing errors that the aliens themselves seemed to ignore. Every ship in the enemy fleet had a role, every maneuver predictable, if one knew where to look. Zira stepped beside him, her golden eyes glowing softly in the command chamber. Your calculations? She asked. Daniel tapped at the holographic map. They'll attack from the northern corridor, expecting us to defend it directly. But their flanks are exposed. If we can outmaneuver them, we can force a retreat or at least reduce their firepower before they reach us. Zira nodded. And you trust this plan? I trust what I can see, Daniel said. If we stick to the timing, we can control the engagement. But it'll be tight. She placed a hand on the console, leaning closer. Humans are unpredictable. That is their advantage. But this plan requires absolute trust. Daniel met her gaze. Then we'll trust each other. The fleet engines roared, vibrations humming through the ship. Zira's crew braced themselves. Orders were given, weapons charged, shields raised. Daniel watched the enemy fleet appear on the sensors, a sea of dark metal ready to crush them. The first wave of enemy fighters surged toward the northern corridor, exactly as Daniel predicted. But instead of meeting them head-on, Zira's fleet split. Small squadrons darted into the flanks while Daniel coordinated the shield adjustments and weapon alignments. Now, he shouted. The diversion worked perfectly. Enemy ships turned to chase phantom targets, leaving their flanks exposed. Zira seized the opportunity, pushing her flagship and elite units into the vulnerable sections. Explosions lit the void and energy beams danced across the dark emptiness of space. From the observation deck, Daniel watched, heart pounding. The enemy commander was skilled, adapting to their maneuvers faster than expected. Every calculation was tested. Daniel had to adjust in real time, suggesting minor course corrections, shield adjustments, and weapon focus points. His hands moved over the console rapidly, tracking every possibility. Kale, once a critic, stood nearby, watching silently. For the first time, he acknowledged Daniel's skill without words. The human was no longer just a mate. He was a strategist who could alter the flow of battle. Despite their careful planning, danger was close. An enemy cruiser broke through the rear defenses, aiming straight for BrokenStarlight. Daniel's mind raced. He saw a chance to redirect the cruiser using an energy field anomaly nearby, but it would require precise timing and perfect coordination. Commander, he called, I can reroute it through the anomaly. It'll damage their ship and keep ours safe, but we have to act now. Zira's eyes gleamed with approval. Do it, human. I trust you. Daniel took a deep breath, fingers flying over the console. Energy beams lanced through the void, tractor fields shifted, and the enemy cruiser collided with the anomaly. Explosions rocked space, shaking ships nearby. Cheers erupted in Zira's fleet, but there was no time to celebrate. Another wave approached, even larger than before. The enemy commander had realized the trick and tried to regain control. Daniel quickly calculated a countermeasure, using smaller vessels as lures to draw the enemy into a trap. He coordinated with Zira, and together they executed a maneuver so precise it left even veteran officers in awe. Throughout the battle, Zira remained calm, her commands sharp and unwavering. Yet Daniel noticed something new. She was listening to him, considering his suggestions, treating him as more than a human curiosity. He was a partner. Hours passed. The battle raged like a storm in space, both sides taking damage. Zira's fleet suffered losses, but Daniel's strategies minimized casualties and maximized efficiency. The enemy began to falter, their formations breaking under the unexpected tactics. Finally, the rival commander realized defeat was imminent. Retreat orders were given, ships veering off into hyperspace. The Valorian fleet had been bested, not just by Zira, but by the unpredictable mind of a human beside her. The command chamber erupted in cheers. Zira's officers, once doubtful, now looked at Daniel with a mixture of awe and respect. Kale approached him, nodding curtly. You were brilliant, he admitted. I underestimated you, Daniel shrugged. I just did what I could see. Zira turned to Daniel, golden eyes bright with pride. Do you understand now? She asked. This is what it means to be valuable, human. Not by decree alone, but by choice, by action, by courage. You've earned more than your place. You've earned their respect. Daniel's chest tightened. I didn't know I could do all that. You can, Zira said softly. You just had to trust yourself. For a long moment they stood side by side, watching the remnants of the enemy fleet disappear into the void. Daniel felt a strange sense of belonging. He had come as a prisoner, captured and weak. Now he stood as a strategist, a mate, and a symbol of something far greater. The victory had consequences. News of Daniel's contributions spread quickly through the Valorian Empire. Officers whispered in disbelief, and some began to question the old prejudices against humans. The High Council had been watching, and for the first time, they could not ignore the presence of a human making a difference in the galaxy's most feared fleet. Later, in private, Zira and Daniel walked through the observation deck. The stars stretched endlessly around them, silent witnesses to what had just occurred. You changed everything today, Zira said quietly. I just followed my instincts, Daniel replied. Her golden eyes softened. Instincts can shape empires, human. Today you've proven that the galaxy underestimates humans at its own risk. Daniel looked at her, realizing the truth of her words. He had been seen as fragile, as expendable, as irrelevant. But his mind, his courage, and his choices had turned the tide of a battle that could have destroyed countless lives. Humans were more than anyone had imagined. Zira placed a hand on his shoulder, firm and grounding. And now we prepare for what comes next. The war is far from over, but you, my human mate, will face it by my side. Together. Daniel nodded, feeling a surge of determination. He had survived capture, whispers, and doubt. He had contributed to victories that no one expected a human to achieve. And now, standing beside BrokenStarlight, he knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, he would meet them, not as a prisoner but as a partner, a strategist, and a human whose fire the galaxy could no longer ignore. The stars stretched endlessly before them, a vast battlefield filled with dangers yet unseen. And Daniel, once a mechanic from Earth, now knew the truth of the human spirit. Fragile, perhaps, but unpredictable, fierce, unbroken. And the galaxy would soon learn that those traits were enough to change everything. The war had ended, not with a single decisive blow, but with a shift in perception, a quiet recognition that the galaxy had underestimated humans for far too long. Commander Zira stood on the observation deck of her flagship, BrokenStarlight, looking at the nebulae that stretched across the cosmos like ribbons of fire and light. Beside her, Daniel leaned on the rail, exhausted but alive. For months, they had fought battles, navigated political intrigue, and endured the suspicion of officers who still whispered about the human mate. But the galaxy had begun to notice. Daniel was no longer just a prisoner or a curiosity. He had become a symbol, proof that humans could survive, adapt, and even thrive in a universe built for warriors far stronger and faster than they were. Zira's voice broke the silence. You've changed more than just this fleet, Daniel. You've changed perceptions. Humans are no longer invisible in the eyes of the Empire. Daniel shook his head, still trying to process it. I just did what I thought was right. I didn't expect to make a difference like this. Her golden eyes softened. That is exactly why you were chosen. Not because you expected greatness, but because you were willing to act despite fear, despite doubt. That is human courage. That is why I claimed you. Daniel looked out into the stars. He thought about the journey that had brought him here. From a captured mechanic to a strategist who could outmaneuver fleets. He had faced alien officers who mocked him, rival commanders who dismissed him, and countless dangers in the void of space. And yet he had survived. He had grown. The doors to the observation deck opened and Kyle stepped in. He no longer carried the scowl of before. Instead, there was a reluctant respect in his posture. Commander, he said, nodding to Zira, then to Daniel. The humans' strategies, they saved countless lives. I underestimated him. Daniel gave a small, tired smile. Thanks, Kyle, I didn't do it alone. Kale hesitated, then nodded firmly. We will not forget it. Zira studied the exchange, then turned her gaze back to Daniel. Do you realize what this means? She asked quietly. I think, humans will be noticed now, Daniel said slowly. Not just as weak prey, but as beings who can contribute, who can survive and adapt. Yes, Zira said. And it will only grow. One human showing courage and ingenuity can spark change in an entire galaxy that thought they were insignificant. And you have sparked that change. Daniel felt a strange pride tempered with humility. He had not sought glory. He had only